So it's true, women do make up more than half the population. आधी जनता हमारे देश की औरतें हैं. And of course, census clarity नहीं देता है what exactly that number is, and we'll know, but हम अंदाज़ा लगा सकते हैं, right? That half the population of this country are women. And we have seen that while recently literacy rates, education rates are improving, right? More girls are being retained in school. But at the same time, only 24% of the women in the entire country participate in the economy, participate in workforce. And we know that there is a direct correlation between the rise in structural and gender-based violence and the decreasing rate of women's participation in the workforce, right? What is really missing when we look at India's growth story? Yes, India has made great economic strides. बहुत तरक्की की है हमने as a country in the recent years. But उस कहानी में क्या missing है? What is missing in that story? Let's look at women's economic participation, and when we overlook that, what happens? What are the problems that can happen for a country? So I'd like to invite on stage for my next panel, the missing growth story, women in the economy, with panelists Dr. Gurucharan Manna, Senior Advisor, National Council of Applied Economic Research, Professor S. Chandrasekhar from the Indira Gandhi Institute of Development Research, Dr. Anamika Priyadarshini, Senior Specialist Research from the Center for Catalyzing Change in India, and Dr. Bidisha Mondal, Research Fellow from IWWAGE.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think I echo the sentiments of this panel when I congratulate Sequin and the Sequin team for the incredible work they have done in the last 15 years. This session could have been called the Data Geeks, okay? You're going to hear data, data, data. And as an economist, I'm asked, what is it that economists or anybody else have anything new to say? I think we quantify the extent of the problem, and to a major extent, civil society organizations and NGOs provide clues in terms of what might work or what might not work. We've kind of coordinated our story in the interest of time. There are few things you need to look out for in the three presentations. First, less than 3 in 10 women in the age group 15 to 59 work in India. In Vietnam, it's 8 out of 10. Even among women who work, a lot of them are in unpaid work. What does that mean? Are women actually underpaid compared to men? One more thing which has not been mentioned is that the fertility rate in India has actually declined. And before I hand it over to the panel, this is a kind of an approximate rule. In another 25 to 30 years, there are going to be more grandparents in India than grandchildren. It's happened in Italy, it's happened in Japan, it's happened in Korea, it's happened in Thailand, it's happening in China. So we are actually undergoing a profound demographic transition. And I'm going to start off by requesting Dr. Manna to make his presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am really privileged to be part of this panel, and more importantly, as a participant of this entire event of today, which is deliberating on a very, very important subject of interest. Before I have a few slides to share with you. Basically, as Professor Chandrasekhar has said, what I will do in this brief discussion, I will take you through some few slides, 6-7 slides, not more than that, quoting some statistics based on the official national sample surveys. But before I go there, if some of you just tell me that what would be my impression about the overall labor market situation in the country today, or for that matter, across the last few decades, I think I may not be wrong if I say the following. First, I think it is of very low labor force participation rate and work participation rate. If we compare with the situation across the globe in respect of many countries, particularly the high income countries and middle income countries, compared to them, India is much in a worse position, number one. Number two, our economy is having predominance of the informal sector. That I think all of you are familiar. I think more than 80% of the workers are engaged in this sector with not much of social security and other kind of benefits. That is the second issue. Third one is the gender gap in employment also, which I will just share with you some of the slides based on the National Sample Survey results. Fourth one is the problem with the quality of job in terms of pay parity, etc., etc. So without wasting much time, before I proceed, let me also, I take this opportunity to congratulate Sequin on completion of their 15 years. Let me go with the slides. First, let us look at, during the last 2 decades, what has been the trend in the percentage of employed by gender. You see, this, I have done it for the persons in the age group of 15 years and above, that is adults. And NSSO, many of you may have handled the data. I am talking about the usual principal and subsidiary status concept. I am not going into details. Basically, the measured time criterion during last 365 days, they have been working. I mean, they are engaged in the economic activity. If I look at the 15 years plus population, over time, during 2 decades, starting from 2004-5 till 22-23, this is PLF's latest result. If you look at the rural India, you see the labor work participation rate has declined for males. For females, during 11-12, it declined substantially, but again, there is some improvement in rural India. But look at male versus female. For rural India, about 78%, nearly 80% of the males are employed as per PLFS 22-23. As against that, for females, it is just half, about 40%. Come to urban India, situation is worse. You see, again, pattern is similar. There is a decline over time. The disparity, was more in 11-12, and some reversal is there, some improvement. But look at the female work participation rate for urban. It is only 24% as against male of work participation rate of 70%. So there is a huge disparity, gender differentials you can say, in the work participation rate between male and female. This is the problem. So problem is much more, if we talk about engagement of women in economic activities, problem is more in urban India as compared to rural. But please remember that in rural, majority of these female workers, they are basically in agriculture. That is also the problem. So anyway, these are the main issues. Next one. We have seen that for rural India, it is female participation rate is about 40%, but there are state level differences. Some states like Assam, Bihar, Haryana, Manipur and Punjab, their work participation rate is much lower than 40%, which is the national average. You see, Bihar it is only 23%, Assam 20%, Haryana 20%, something like this. And urban India, just in the previous slide I told you saw, it is about 24% of the women who are engaged in workforce as per latest survey. But look at the states like Bihar, Delhi, Haryana, etc. The percentage is much lower. So this is the overall work participation rate, disparity between male and female. Come to the next slide, please. If we go by this work participation rate again by type of education, the problem is more again with the educated people. Please see, RM means rural male, then rural female. Overall female participation rate, I told you, rural India it is 40%. But if we talk about the women in the, who are secondary or above or graduate, the percentage declines further. That means they have completed the education, secondary plus or graduate, but they are not in job. Because of lack of jobs, definitely, or whatever could be the reasons. So rural India problem is like this. Urban again, situation is more or less similar. I am not going into the details. You can see it. The problem is here. Okay, come to the next one. Okay, here this is percentage distribution of all the workers, you see, by the status of employment. Out of all these workers, if you see rural female, you see about 43%, nearly half, they are working as helper. they are assisting somebody else in the household who are actually owners. So these ladies, they are the family labor, you can say, self-employed, but they are assisting the other owners, 40%. Regular wage salaried workers, only 8%. Out of 100 women in rural India, only 8 are in regular wage salaried job. That means they have some kind of pay protection, something like that. Urban India, we are much better. Out of total workforce, you see female, 50% are regular wage salaried. So problem is more in rural India. And another problem in rural India is that among the females who are employed in rural India, nearly 1/5, 21%, they are engaged in casual labor. They are casual laborers. They don't have any, something like regular wage type of employment. Anytime they may not get any work. So these are basically the problems. Yes, next slide. Yeah. Now, I also thought that it would be appropriate to share with you the kind of wage disparity and what has been the trend over time. Again, here you see for during 2 decades, 11, 12 to 22, 23, these are the regular wage salaried workers. If you see over time, for rural India, you see the wage disparity has declined over time. During 11, 12, on an average, a woman worker was getting 38% less wage than their male counterparts. 38% less. It has declined to 20% as on today. So, meaning is that rural, out of all regular wage salaried workers, female workers, they are getting 20% less wage than the male counterparts. In urban, the pattern has remained same, again 20%. Casual laborer who are not engaged in public work. See, these are the, among all types of workers, casual labor category is the worst one. They don't have regular employment. So, among them you see, again, on an average, a woman casual laborer is getting about 30 to 30%, 35% less wage than the male workers. Next one. This is a very small slide. You see here, average daily wage of casual laborers. They are the worst lot. Among them, if you see, rural India, on an average per day, during 22-23, this is latest PLFS data I am telling, by National Sample Survey Office, they were getting about 416 rupees per day, rural males, as against females who got only 287 rupees per day at current price. Urban, these are the figures, so nearly 300 rupees. Here, I think you must be aware there is a concept of minimum wage in our country, and Ministry of Labor and Employment, they periodically update those minimum wage figures. Recently, there is an expert group where I am a member on fixation on minimum wage. The guiding principle of fixation of minimum wage is that any worker should be given a wage on a daily basis which should be adequate for his or her family's some kind of decent standard of living to take care of nutritional aspect and other associated costs with non-food related thing. So on that principle, the wage rate is fixed, daily wage. Just one second. So, Ministry of Labor and Employment on 19th January 2017, they suggested that unskilled workers who would be working in the area of agriculture, field agriculture, they must get at least 300 rupees on a day. And look at rural average women, what they were getting? 287 in the casual laborer. So what I want to say is that even average wage of the rural female workers who are engaged in casual work, they were not getting daily wage, minimum wage prescribed by the Ministry of Labor and Employment. Next one. Finally, this slide is the last one. I will not take much time. You see, in the 2011-12 survey, NSS 68th round employment unemployment survey, among the persons who were engaged in domestic duties on a major time basis, you see, a question was asked to them. Since they were spending most of their time in household chores, a direct question was asked that are you willing to accept work, gainful employment, if the work is made available at your household premises? If yes, what type of job and what type of facility you need? So these are the findings. Nearly 60% during 11-12 of the female workers, they were engaged in domestic duties on a measured time basis. And what is the reason? Because there was no other family member who could take up that domestic duties work. So they were helpless. They have, number one. Then coming to willing to accept work, out of all those people, 60%, in rural India, about 1/3 of the women, they were predominantly engaged in domestic duties. They said that yes, we are willing to accept gainful employment if work is made available within the household. And urban India, it is about 30%. What type of work we are acceptable? Tailoring, dairy, other animal husbandry, poultry, spinning, weaving, and food processing. These are the kind of feedbacks what we got through the National Sample Survey in 2011-12. And type of assistance, they said that initial finance on easy terms or working finance and some kind of training will help them. So finally, I would conclude. I think next slide. I'm not going into the issues. The problems are we have already described. I think some steps, policy interventions are necessary to address those problems what have been highlighted. And finally, I think making available some suitable work to the women at household premises with certain kind of facilities in terms of providing loans or training would definitely improve the situation of low work participation rate among the females. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Manna, for that nice presentation. The next two speakers, Dr. Mondal and Dr. Priyadarshini. So Dr. Manna was a data producer. I think the other three panel members are data consumers, but even within this, Dr. Bidisha Mondal, Dr. Anamika Priyadarshini collect their own data. Dr. Mondal, I'll ask you to make the next presentation, where IWWAGE has done a 5-state study where she will share the findings.
Thank you, Sequin, for giving us this opportunity. I work as a research fellow with IWWAGE. IWWAGE stands for Institute for What Works to Advance Gender Equality. We majorly focus on evidence generation to promote and facilitate women's economic empowerment through evidence-based policy recommendations. So today I'll be sharing few findings from one of our studies. We attempted to unravel the demand side and the supply side enablers and barriers of women's labor force participation. Can we move to the next one? Next slide. Yeah. So before sharing the findings with you, I would like to take you through the existing evidences on female labor force participation in India. Now, according to the latest PLFS round, that is 2022-23, the female labor force participation has actually increased from 23.3% in 2017-18 to 37%. However, it's still much lower than the male labor force participation rate in India, which stands at 79% in according to the same PLFS round. And also, this FLAPR is not uniform across the age cohort or across the education level. For example, we can see that for the age cohort of 15 to 29 years, the FLAPR is very low at 24.5%. Now, this might be due to women pursuing education at this age cohort. And also the female labor force participation rate is very low for those women who have just completed higher secondary level of education. Now this again might be due to the U-shaped relationship between education and female labor force participation rate. So according to the U-shaped theory, when women gain secondary or higher secondary level of education, the unskilled, low skill, low wage work generally they feel uncomfortable with, and that's why they generally drop out of the labor force. Now, to have a global comparison, I looked at the ILO modeled estimates, and according to the ILO modeled estimates, FLAPR in India has risen. It has risen from 21.5% in 2017 to 24% in 2022, but it's still lower marginally than the South Asian average, which stands at 25.6%. However, it's much lower than the global average, which stands at 47.3% in 2022. Now, this low female labor force participation rate in India, this has been prevalent despite the country witnessing high economic growth in the last 2 decades, of course with few breaks. Now generally high economic growth is supposed to lead to higher economic opportunities, and that is supposed to lead to an enhanced female labor force participation rate, but which hasn't happened in India's case. Also, according to the NFHS data, the fertility rate has declined from 4.04% in 1990 to 2% in 2019-21. Now, a decline in fertility rate is also supposed to be associated with an increase in female labor force participation rate due to less childcare responsibility. However, that also hasn't happened in India. Thirdly, there is an increasing educational attainment of Indian women, which should have got translated in increased female labor force participation rate, but that also hasn't happened. Now, to solve this puzzle, there has been numerous studies trying to explain this. And few of the studies pointed towards the individual and household characteristics creating barrier for female labor force participation rate. Few pointed towards demand side factors like lack of employment opportunities. Some studies pointed towards measurement issues in the usual labor force surveys, leading to underestimation of female labor force participation rate. Few studies pointed towards the restrictive social norms, and few towards the lack of public infrastructure needed to promote female labor force participation. Now, although there exist numerous studies explaining the low female labor force participation rate, there is a need of continuous evidence generation because of the changing labor market dynamics, which is getting influenced by the technological adoption of technology, the digitalization drive. So there is a need of continuous evidence generation to understand the current situation. Can we go to the next one? Yeah, so driven by the need to understand the current situation regarding female labor force participation, IWWAGE has conducted a study. The study is based on a large-scale household survey. We had interviewed approximately 5,000 females and 1,000 males across 5 states, namely Madhya Pradesh, Jharkhand, Delhi, Rajasthan, and Karnataka. The choice of the states has been based on their FLAPR rate. So we have tried to pick few of the good performing states and few of the poorly performing states. And then we tried to unravel the enablers and barriers of female labor force participation rate and tried to put forward some actionable policy recommendation. So a few of the key findings are the following ones. So skill training has been a great enabler of female labor force participation rate. Women who received skill training are much more likely to join the labor force. As we surveyed, we found that the preference of skill training is majorly concentrated in 3 sectors: sewing and stitching, computer and related applications, and beauty parlors. However, we found there is a disparity between urban and rural women. So rural women, they lag a lot in the awareness about the skill training programs, and of course, as a result, in receiving skill training. Again, the second key finding has been that mobility acted as a constraint for female labor force participation, and women generally prefer workplaces which are closer to their home, and as they reported to be comfortable with 20 to 25 minutes of commute to reach the workplace. Thirdly, care responsibilities came out to be a big barrier for women to join labor force participation, and we found that women who belong to household with piped water, electricity, and cooking gas, they are more likely to join the labor force. Now, investment in this household infrastructure basically leads to reduced unpaid activities, and that's why they get free time to join the labor force. And also we found evidence in support of the income effect. What does it say? Now, it says that women who belong to the wealthier household, they generally are less likely to join the labor force because women, because of the existing gender roles, they are supposed to be the secondary income earners. So whenever they belong to wealthier household, they are less likely to join the labor force. We found evidence in support of that. And also, we found that women with education level of graduation level and above, that means women with tertiary level of education, they are actually less likely to part of the workforce. Now, this finding is in contrast with the common U-shaped theory, which says that once women reach the tertiary level of education, their labor force participation increases. But we found our finding is in contrast with that. Again, married women, since they face a lot stricter social norms, they are less likely to participate in the labor force. Can we move to the next one? Yeah. So the previous slide showed us the findings which we got from the data analysis. Now, we had probed further the female respondents to understand what do they think to be their barriers and enablers of labor force participation. So we asked with asking them whether they are working for pay or not. If they said yes, we asked what are the factors which encouraged them to take up this job, and what are the factors that is actually helping them to retain the job. And then we asked them whether they prefer self-employment or not. If they answered yes, we asked what are the issues and challenges they faced while seeking self-employment. Similarly, those women who answered that they are not working for pay or profit, we asked them whether they are willing to work or not. And then if they reported that they are not willing to work, then we asked what are the factors that is actually constraining their willingness to work. And then for those who are willing to work, we asked whether they're whether they're looking for work or not. If they answered yes, we asked what are the factors which are preventing their employment. Can we go to the next one? Yeah, so this chart summarizes the responses of the females interviewed. And the first chart is basically for those women who are working currently, and shows us the factors they have told to be most important, which encourage them to take up this job and which are actually helping them to retain the job. Now, if we look at the rural women, we will see that proximity to the workplace has been the most important factor for them in retaining and selecting the job. The second most important factor has been their ability to do their household chores and care duties along with the job. The third most important factor has been flexible work timings. Similarly, among urban women, we have seen that the most important factor has been their ability to perform domestic and care responsibilities along with the job. The next important factor has been the proximity of the workplace to home. And the third important factor has been, again, flexible work timings. Now, this next chart, the second chart, is basically for those women who are not currently in the workforce. So these are the factors they have mentioned, these are actually constraining them from labor force participation. And again, among rural women, we can see that the most important factor cited by them are inadequate wages. So they mentioned that the inadequate wages are basically disincentivizing them to take up employment. And the second most important next to the inadequate wages, childbirth and getting married. These two factors actually constrain their labor force participation. Among urban women, the most important factor has been, again, household chores and responsibilities. This actually acted as a barrier for their labor force participation. And getting married is the next important constraint cited by the urban women. Can we move to the next one? Yeah. So these are the actionable points which are actually coming out from our study. As we have seen that skilling has been a great enabler for labor force participation, raising awareness about the skilling programs, its benefit, and also setting specific gender targets in these programs and encouraging enrollment in non-traditional skilling courses could actually help a lot in enhancing female labor force participation. And also we found that mobility came out to be a constraint, so providing safe and affordable transportation would help a lot. Similarly, since again we found that women are not very comfortable with long distance commute, so creating work opportunities closer to their home would also be an enabler. And as we found that care responsibilities came out to be a barrier for their labor force participation, thus investment in household and care infrastructure like childcare facilities and also encouraging the workplaces to provide flexible working hours would enhance the female labor force participation. And as we mentioned that women with tertiary level of education, they are basically less likely to join the labor force. Now the reason it points towards, the finding points towards, is lack of quality work opportunities which are suitable for highly educated women. So creating decent work opportunities commensurate with high level of education would again increase labor force participation among the women with tertiary level of education. Last but not the least, actually the most important one, changing the gender norms through mass campaign programs, that would be a great enhancer of female labor force participation. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mondal. I'm just going to take 30 seconds to tell you how this story is evolving. India has a very low female labor force participation rate. The question is why? So Dr. Manna laid out the context. The study done by IWWAGE and what Dr. Mondal presented was, is it a demand side issue or is it a supply side issue? Demand means firms are not willing to hire. Supply means women don't want to work. So there is actually no clear resolution of what drives it. Is it demand side or supply side? And also the question that we really don't have an answer to unless we have great data is why are women actually paid less? Is it because they have working fewer hours or in terms of lower productivity? So while female education has actually increased, what's happening to returns to education is an important point, and what happens to perceived returns to education, and what's happening in one particular state of Bihar, and that's where the great insights that Dr. Priyadarshini will actually bring in.
Thank you, Professor Chandrasekhar, and congratulations once again to Sequin on their 15th, and thank you so much for having this wonderful deliberation to celebrate your 15th. So my Professor Chandrasekhar has already set the context. Next slide, please. And I will not spend time on workforce participation of women. We have already discussed a lot about it. So I'll straight away zoom into Bihar. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, so the struggle is that there are a lot of policies, and if I'm talking about the state of Bihar, I think we are one of the most progressive states when it comes to policy. Don't ask me if it is getting translated to reality or data points or not. But we were the first state that reserved 50% seats for women in Panchayati Raj system or local governing system. In 2013, we reserved 35% seats in government job, in police, starting from police, and then by 16, we have reserved 35% seats for women in all government jobs. But still, the female workforce participation rate remains a huge challenge for us. And Professor Vibhuti Patel often talks about the glass ceiling and sticky floor. So my presentation will mainly focus on the sticky floor part of it, how social norms are obstructing women. And this is based on a study which we had conducted in 12 districts of Bihar, and 12,600 people had participated. So it's kind of a massive study. And those participants were from 12 districts of Bihar. Out of that 12 districts, 6 were those where we have high prevalence of child marriage, 3 were medium, and 3 were low prevalence of early marriage. And the backdrop of this particular study was that Bihar government launched a campaign in 2017 to end child marriage from the state. So in this backdrop, we conducted this study, and drawing from this particular study, my presentation will talk about 3 particular social norms or perceptions, or whatever you want to call it. One is low perceived utility of girls' education, and now we know that why girls' education or overall education's utility has declined, I would say. Then time poverty for women and girls, and finally tendency to control girls' and women's sexuality, mobility, and assertion of choice. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this is about methodology. Since we do not have much time, I will not spend much time on it, but I can come back to it whenever you want me to come back. Can we go to the next, please? So perceived utility of girls' education, I'll begin with that. Next. We clearly saw that overall the perceived utility of education was not very high, but there was a clear-cut gap in the aspiration of parents. When it came to girls, the idea was that, okay, 10th, 12th, they should be educated up to 10th or 12th. But when it came to boys, jitna beta padhna chahe. It could be master's, PhD, whatever the boy wants to do. So aspiration level, definitely there was a very, very clear gender gap. Then we had, our participants were divided in 6 categories. We had interacted with youth also, and when I talk about youth, girls in the age group of 14 to 24, boys in the age group of 16 to 26. And more than 7,000 participants were these youth. And then their parents, mother and father, primary gatekeepers, and community leaders, whom we are calling secondary gatekeepers. So this perceived utility of education was lowest among the secondary gatekeepers. And the parents and youth also said that our parents feel tremendous pressure from the society to prioritize our marriage over our education, to prioritize our marriage over our career. So there was no, that pressure is out there, and families are struggling with that. And lack of economic opportunities is also, Professor Dr. Manna and Dr. Mondal has already shared that even despite higher education, despite rise in education, we are not seeing that women are getting economic opportunities or being absorbed in work opportunities. And that is also, they're not setting good role models, so that inspiration is not coming. And finally, we think that gender norms are internalized, but this particular study, it was like, it was very painfully girls are cognizant about their realities. And it could be because they have access to telephone. The aspirations are high because they are connected to social media, they're connected to seeing Facebook, seeing world, what is happening around the world, what other girls of their age are doing in other parts of the country. So the aspiration is there, and they understand, many of them understand that this is discrimination, this is oppressive, but we can't do. So that pain was there. And some, by the way, in bottom and sometimes inside, can we go back? You can see some of the kind of, statements. I'm not going to repeat that. Those are from, because it's a mixed method study, we also conducted in-depth interview and focus group discussion, so it's coming from that. Next, please. Then second was time used on education preparedness and paid work. So there also clearly we saw that it's very interesting that majority of participants, be it boy or girl, they were not spending even 1 hour on studies. And I'm talking about youth. So, but then there was definitely gender gap when it came to spending time on education or spending time on paid work. There was a gender gap, but alarming fact is that most of the youth are not spending even 1 hour on educational preparedness. One more thing that paid work, when we see paid work, there is a striking, alarming gender gap, like spending, okay, I'll go to the next slide. Time poverty for women and girls. So in 2019, there was this first time use survey was conducted in India. We all are very aware about it. And that survey shows that women are spending more than 19% of their time on unpaid work, whereas men are spending less than 2.5% time of their work. When it comes to Bihar, if the national average is that women are spending 6 hours on unpaid work, in Bihar, women are spending 8 hours. So it's like really high. So this is what we saw, that boys are mostly not spending time on domestic work, and that is a huge issue. And I think for Sequin, it's very interesting that when we talk about engaging men, this is one of the very important points, because of time poverty, many girls and women are not able to join the workforce, because that burden is always, in most of the cases, on them. One more thing, that in rural Bihar, what is happening in most of the country, most of the states in the country, we are seeing this women self-help group members are coming up, frontline workers are coming up. So there's this whole generation of women professionals in rural spaces. And the question is, who is looking after their domestic responsibilities? I do not have exact data on that, but my studies are indicating that it is their adolescent daughters who are dropping out after 8th. So we are seeing that enrollment is not an issue in India anymore, but dropout after 8th grade is a huge issue. And I'm not saying that these are initiatives of women's empowerment are, we should, we can't condemn it, but it's time. Now we should look back what's happening at their home. Can we go? We had data on sleep and leisure also, but I'm not talking about that. This is very important, tendency to control girls' sexuality, mobility, and assertion of choice. We had some questions around that, and then one was assertion to patriarchal norms. And I'm like, I'm shocked to share that this was highest among young unmarried boys. And even when it comes to assertion of patriarchal choice, oppressive patriarchal norms, it was highest among married boys. Where it was lowest was in women's collective. So women's collectives are clearly talking about these things. These women's collectives are, even in rural India, they are providing that space where people are talking about it at least, and discussing, and because they have they're connected to maybe somebody is coming from Delhi or US and talking to them. So that aspiration, that understanding is also enriched. They are going through certain level of trainings, be it women panchayat leader, be it women members of self-help group. So that's also helping them. I mean, I clearly remember that ये लड़कियां तो ये Facebook और Twitter क्या है, ये भी तो चौक चौराहा है, वहाँ तो लड़कियां बैठी ही हैं, उनका क्या करें? So that fear, that, and when we talk about, women access to digital media, women's access to digital means, and we know that right now, even for work preparedness, even for many other things, even panchayat women leaders, they have to have access to smartphone to do their work, basic work. And digital gender gap is a huge issue. Can we go to the next slide, please? This is not only India, actually. Globally, Men are showing more regressive tendency in comparison to women. Women are showing progressive tendency, whereas men are turning. Next slide, please. Next. So I will not repeat it, but I just want to say that clear gender gap in the aspiration was clearly found. And another interesting thing is that most of the parents said that the daughter is dumb. Mota dimag hai, that was the common term. Bhodu hai, fail kar jati hai, padh nahi paati hai. This is the narrative of the parents, that why you withdrew your daughter from the school, why you opted to marry your, daughter when, they will not tell you that she was under 18. They will usually say, 19 ki hui thi to shadi kiya tha. That's standard. So the parents' narrative is that daughter is not good in studies, but when we talk to daughters in the focus group discussion, it came very clearly that they don't get time for studies. And after 8th grade, you need more time because it's more competitive, there are more subjects, so you need time. Can we go to the next slide? So we had some recommendation which I would like to share with you. I think Professor Manna and Dr. Mondal has already shared about it, that women need, all the data is showing that women need flexible, access to work opportunities nearer to their homes. Another thing is that I just shared at the beginning of my discussion that there are lots of policies, but majority of participants were not aware about those policies. So we need to kind of, Bangladesh has set a very good example that it's not, policies are there, but then there is concurrent effort to ensure that people are benefiting from those policies. And there I think there is a huge role that civil society organizations need to play. Sensitizing boys and men, I think whatever Sequin is doing is phenomenal. I think that is much, much, much needed because we do not want, these boys who are raping, 17, 18-year-old boys who are raping other girls or who are killing their sisters, they are our children. What kind of society we are creating? And therefore it's high time that we should invest on boys, sensitize them, talk to them, work with them. Time poverty for girls, people don't realize that ultimately to shadi karna hai, ghar sambhalna hai, but how, mota dimag hai, or it's how it's devaluing, dehumanizing your daughters. That is something we need to think about, and maybe women's collectives can play a very important role. We are trying to work with Jivika, which is NRLM's initiative in Bihar, and we are trying to discuss those issues. Whatever findings our studies are indicating, we are trying to integrate, try to see that we mainly work on research for impact, so we try to see that how it is impacting people for whom these studies are being conducted. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I think we made up some time, so can we get, we have had a very patient audience in case if somebody is still cued into the data world and have any questions or non-data questions.
Yes, can we pass the mic around?
So ultimately what you're saying is that education for girls is now going to be incentivized. Are we going to now have a policy where we are going to be, the new education policy, the way it's also looking at higher education, is there some kind of a linkage in terms of how the government is looking at skilling and education as we go forward? For the economists on the panel, it'll be great to kind of get some insights.
I'm not talking about data exactly here, but at the same time, I'm talking about data also. So the thing is that, so there was one study on desire for third child if you have 2 daughters. The NFHS data is showing that women with a graduate degree had more desire to have third child with 2 daughters. So what is happening that with education, I don't want to use these terms Sanskritization, Brahmatization, but it is happening. We can't deny that. So you try to fit in that conventional patriarchal setup with education. I'm educated, but at the same time, I'm fitting into those norms. That pressure is there, especially for educated women. Because in my study, I could not share that most of the parents said that, मेरी बेटी पढ़ना चाहती थी, मैंने उसको permission दे दिया, पर मैंने कहा ठीक से रहना होगा. What does that ठीक से रहना होगा means? That pressure to prove that you're educated still, I'm talking about the qualitative perspective. That is there. Second is that what is happening in the names of women, in the name of women's empowerment, that we are ensuring physical representation of women, enhancing physical representation of women. And I have, like, I was talking to Tara, I will share some of my papers, which are showing that women, you know, physical representation is not necessarily implying gender sensitization. Because when you are at a position of power, women leader, be it self-help group member leader or Panchayati Raj leader, you become custodians of patriarchy also. And that pressure is huge. You have to finally operate in that rural or urban political circle where you have to play the game as per its norms. So that is also happening at many different levels. But I'll leave to Dr. Manna and Dr. Mondal about what exactly the data is showing.
So actually what I feel, women are pursuing tertiary education, but the lack of employment opportunities, I mean already in the formal sector, in the high skill, high wage sector, there is limited job growth. Now, within that limited opportunities also, if women are facing the employer's bias, that will actually finally disincentivize them to pursue higher education. So that needs to be addressed. The employer's bias women are facing when they are going to the formal sector for the regular wage, regular work, high skill, high wage work. So that employer bias has to be addressed basically. And also maybe in those sectors, for example, in the IT sector, we often hear that there is less flexibility regarding the work schedule. Also maybe due to the childbirth or due to marriage, if women are taking career breaks, that is actually hampering their promotional opportunities to a large extent in this high skill, high wage sector. So that also has to be addressed. That has to be internalized in the organizational policy, how to address that, how to again bring them back and not really affect their promotional opportunities due to these factors. So yeah.
Briefly add just one point. So data is also showing that men are entering into kind of work which was traditionally supposed to be women's work, kind of like home-based work, and women are being pushed out in the kind of work which cannot be remunerated or calculated. So that is another issue.
Hi. Excuse me. I was wondering about any studies computing the economic value of women's work at home, and whether you you refer to that in your work and in your studies.
So you need very good time use data to actually quantify women's work at home. So there was a 2019 study, the NSS did conduct the survey, so it kind of reinforces what our two panelists basically said. From the age of 14 onwards, you do see a divergence in time use pattern. In terms of should you start putting a monetary value on domestic household work, that's pretty much an open question. At one level I can flip the question back and say, what do I gain by actually putting a monetary value on it? Instead of saying, do they actually get a regular wage salary jobs, social security benefits, etc. But this is not to suggest that people have not tried it, but yes, they have done some work in this area.
No, I think time has come. Yes, I appreciate the question. I think all of you will agree that the time has come to value women's work, and a lot of discussions have taken place across the globe. I am aware some countries, neighboring countries also did some study on valuing women's work. Unfortunately, as per my knowledge goes, in India, we have not done much of work in this area. Let me tell you, I think many of you may be aware that recently, not recently, about 2-3 years back, Labour Bureau, Ministry of Labour and Employment, they did some survey on domestic work particularly, women and men engaged in different kind of domestic duties, including cleaning of household premises, utensils, other maid servants, what they are doing. And in that survey, I was actually in their expert group, I was also a member. Only thing is that results have not yet been in public domain. Now, if that is there, let us hope that it should come anytime in the public domain. If that is there, we can at least have some idea about the women engaged in different types of domestic duties, what is their average earnings, etc., and number of hours worked and all. That would be giving us some kind of ground realities. This information could be utilized to convert the women's total time in KR economy as 2019 NSSO survey, time use survey has revealed, to have some kind of estimate about the valuation of the overall KR economy in so far as India is concerned. I think we have dearth of data, little, I think some initiative is required. That much only I can say. But based on the existing PLFS data, I think it is difficult to have some idea about the what should be the per day amount of compensation that the ladies or other maid servants are getting, because the database is very limited there. So unless there is a dedicated survey like something like Labour Bureau has done it, that could be a very useful tool to translate the volume of KR economy in terms of the number of women or their time devoted to that those work, to some kind of valuation of the KR economy and what is their share in the overall GDP. I think it is itself a very challenging and interesting exercise. Thank you.
तो मैं ये कहना चाह रही थी कि जो चारों प्रेजेंटेशन है और जो विषय है वो काफ़ी इम्पोर्टेंट और बहुत अच्छा रहा है. इसमें जो एक बात आई है कि जो हाई इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ है और डिक्लाइन फर्टिलिटी रेट भी है, तो इसमें एक्सपेक्ट किया जाता है कि महिलाएं बड़ी संख्या में वर्कफोर्स में आ सकती हैं. मतलब और उसके जो दिक्कतें हैं उस पर बात कर रहे हैं. मैं सोच रही हूँ कि इसमें ये भी है कि जो करंट में जो काम कर रही है विमेन वर्कफोर्स, उसके बारे में भी कुछ और स्टडीज़ आने चाहिए सामने. और जैसे अगर हम देखते हैं, हम एकदम रिमोट रूरल एरिया में काम करते हैं और वहाँ देखते हैं आज हर लड़की का एक एस्पिरेशन है कि वो कोई ना कोई काम करे. और जो पढ़ रहे हैं वो चाहते हैं कि पेरेंट्स भी पढ़ा रहे हैं और लड़कियाँ पढ़ रही हैं, तो वो चाहते हैं कि वो जॉब मार्केट में आएँ. और जो लड़कियाँ एक्चुअली जॉब मार्केट में हैं, अगर हम उनका देखें तो बहुत सारे, जैसे दिल्ली में भी अलग अलग इंडस्ट्री में, फैक्ट्रीज़ में लड़कियां काम करती हैं. और मैंने खुद यहाँ देखा है एक स्टडी करने के दौरान में कि बड़ी संख्या में स्कूल से लड़कियां जब सुबह से आती हैं दोपहर में, तो उनके लिए टाइमिंग ऐसे हैं कि 2 बजे घर आते ही वो बैग रखती हैं, तैयार होकर बस, मतलब कम्यूट करने के लिए उनको बस भी लगाए हुए हैं बस्तियों के अंदर, और वो बस में जाती हैं और रात को 10 बजे तक काम करती हैं और अगले दिन मॉर्निंग में फिर से वो काम पर जाती हैं. तो इसमें काफ़ी सारी दिल्ली के बस्तियों में लड़कियां इस तरह के कामों में भी लगी हुई हैं. और जो एक स्टडी हमने किया था आज़ाद फाउंडेशन की तरफ से, उसमें हमने देखा था लड़कियों के काम को लेकर एस्पिरेशन क्या है और अवेलेबिलिटी ऑफ जॉब्स किस तरह के हैं, और जो लड़कियां काम कर रही हैं वो वास्तव में क्या चाहती हैं, और उनको जो काम पर लग रही हैं लड़कियां, और जो स्किल्स के ट्रेनिंग है, जो स्किल्स ट्रेनिंग है वो किस प्रकार के स्किल्स प्रोवाइड कर रहे हैं. क्योंकि बहुत बड़ा हमारे यहाँ पर पूरा सेक्टर है जो स्किल प्रोवाइड करने में काम कर रहा है, और क्या वो स्किल्स लड़कियों को कितना कमा सकती है उस स्किल को पाकर. तो जॉब मार्केट में भी लड़कियों की जगह कहाँ है, जब हम एक पूरा केयर वर्क के बारे में या घर में काम कर रही है या इंटरेस्टेड नहीं है, इस तरह की हमारी जो बातें निकल कर आ रही है, उसमें ये देखने की बात है कि उसमें वो लड़कियां बहुत ज़्यादा कमा नहीं पा रही हैं. और ऐसे भी देखने में आया जहाँ 10 साल 12 साल भी काम कर लिया, अगर उन्होंने 6,000 से फैक्ट्रीज़ में काम शुरू किया था तो 7-8 हज़ार से ऊपर पहुँच नहीं रही है वो 6 साल 8 साल काम करके भी. तो ये एक बड़ा, मुझे लगता है कि इसको भी बहुत हमें अध्ययन करने की ज़रूरत है, और हमें ये देखने की ज़रूरत है कि जो इतना एस्पिरेशन आ रहा है लड़कियों में, इतनी बड़ी संख्या में लड़कियों के साथ काम हो रहा है, एक्चुअली उसकी अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ तो बहुत मुश्किल लग रहा है इस इकोनॉमिक सिस्टम के अंदर कि उस तरह के अपॉर्चुनिटी बनेंगे. अंत में हम कुछ 1, 2, 5, 10 एग्जाम्पल दिखा के, अगर हमारा जो आज का वर्ल्ड है, इकोनॉमिक वर्ल्ड, ये दिखाता है कि ये इतने स्टार्टअप, ये लोग यहाँ थे, यहाँ पहुँच गए, वो 10, 20, 50 या 100 से हम हज़ारों लड़कियों तक नहीं पहुँच सकते हैं. तो ये जो इंडिविजुअल एग्जाम्पल दिखाने का है, इसको भी हमें क्वेश्चन करना चाहिए कि ये लोग पहुँच गए हैं और इसलिए हर कोई पहुँच सकता है अगर वो पहुँच गए तो जो लार्जर कॉन्टेक्स्ट है वो काफ़ी फ़र्क है.
थैंक यू मैम. मैम, कैन यू इंट्रोड्यूस योरसेल्फ फॉर जस्ट फॉर द पर्पस?
मेरा नाम इंदिरा पंचोली है और मैं राजस्थान से हूँ.
When we talk about unpaid work being recognized in the systems of national account (SNI), whether it's a production method, consumption method, or expenditure method, we need to have macro level idea of what women are contributing, then only policy makers will not treat them as a sponge or ready sinkers, no? They will be treated as those who are contributing and providing supply for this, like supply, continuous supply of workforce. That is at a philosophical level. Practically, after the US study of 2019, so many judgments in lower courts, family courts, high courts, and even Supreme Court, where husband did not want to pay any maintenance to his wife.
Yeah.
That has changed because judges are now, because now this unpaid work is a part of the module for judges training. So that they are giving maintenance. Accident compensation. All the insurance company, when a wife dies in an accident, they say, घरेलू काम ही करती थी, मुफ्त की रोटी तोड़ती थी. That kind of argument is not acceptable. So if you see, Prabha Kodishwaran has done very good study of the recent judgments on maintenance and accident compensation. So it does make difference.
I think it needs a larger discussion how it can be brought into national system of accounting. That itself is a hot topic and it should be separately discussed. I think we need to have deliveries.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much, fellow panelists. Thank you very much,
We have
audience.
a round of
It's been
applause.
a pleasure to be part of this. Thank you.